Afternoon. We're going to talk about a lot of different things today. Our next guest is going to be Peter Sepp. He's with the President of National Taxpayer Association, and he's going to talk about an issue that is on everybody's mind, thanks to this new word that our future or our current vice president that wants to be president nominee had to say the other day.
And I will work to pass the first ever federal ban on price gauging on food.
And it seems like the whole problem in this country is we have price gauging on food. So, Pete, what do you say about price gauging and the whole merger situation and being held back by Rob Bonta, being held back by the lawsuit going on with the FTC right now, and the fact that the merger between your Kroger's and Albertson is being held up, and you only represent about 13% of the grocery market, while you're being targeted, while Costco, Trader Joe's, Amazon, all the other people, they can do whatever they want, but because you're trying to save consumers money, be more competitive in the marketplace, and yet we have this big price gauging problem, I guess, in the world. What do you say?
Yeah, this is a real head scratcher. I'm not sure I understand the term price gauging, but it's pretty revealing because the federal government doesn't know what it's doing here, from the White House on down to the Federal Trade Commission, on down to state leaders like California's Attorney General, which is suing to block the Kroger-Albertsons merger separately. We've got a lot of problems here. You really laid out one of the primary difficulties with this case, which is trying to assert that a Kroger-Albertsons merger would be a monopoly. Wouldn't be even close when you take a look at retailers like Costco and Amazon and the like. What the Federal Trade Commission is trying to do here, and it's doing this in a lot of other areas of the economy, by the way, is to define its own market in its own little universe. In other words, a market that isn't really reflecting the way consumers currently shop. People go to big box stores and club stores to stock up on various things. They might pop by a small grocery store to pick up a little produce. They might go online and have an Aldi or somebody deliver them some groceries. They do all of these things not only for the price and the value and the selection, but the convenience. The Federal Trade Commission is saying, no. We are defining the market for grocery shopping as traditional retail outlets, not online ones, where you can get everything in one place. Again, that's not the way people shop now. That's the way they shopped 40 years ago. And the government is saying, we want to turn back the clock 40 years. They can't do that. And I think this is a real distraction from some of the policies the federal government has pursued that has made grocery prices worse and has made our economy worse. They're trying to distract us here.
Well, I think that's the case, and certainly with the FTC chair, Lena Khan, I mean, some of the crazy decisions that they've done, this being one of them, where they're basically defining a small segment of your style grocers. I sell a lot of products into grocery stores in my other business. And, I just saw that Rayleigh's merged with the stores in Bashas' and the other stores in Arizona to be more competitive, to expand their footprint. In this case, there's some talk that, because you're going to have to close stores, divest stores, that it's going to be less competitive. But the reality is those stores you're closing, aren't they going to go to somebody like a Rayleigh's, a Save Mart, someone other that's not in this group that you're doing with Kroger-Albertsons merger?
Yeah, sure. In fact, the government is requiring Kroger-Albertsons to divest some of its stores as a condition of the merger, and those are spaces that are ready-made, turnkey, for another retail outlet to go in there. That's what's often going to happen. And, of course, just this week, during the trial, essentially, that's being heard right now in Oregon District Court to try and get what the federal government wants here, which is a preliminary injunction. In other words, to stop all merger action until another administrative hearing can be held. Kroger's CEO pledged on the stand in testimony that this merger is going to immediately result in activity that will lower prices. He committed to that on the stand, and that's important because the government can always go back if this merger is approved and say, aha, you pledged to lower prices and you didn't do it. The deal is off. And the federal government has done that before in other parts of the economy. When a merger doesn't yield the results that are expected, they can actually reverse the government's okay for a merger and start breaking it all up again. So, there you have it. It's part of the record now.
Yeah, but here's one thing I was reading. In the decade before the pandemic, food prices have rose about 13.4%. Since the pandemic, they're about 19% overall and 17.5% for wholesale food prices. A lot of this has been driven by policies that have been put in place, the overall inflation. I mean, just since the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we've had inflation at about 21% overall in the Biden presidency. So $400,000 is now worth $332,000. I mean, these are all external factors that Lena Horne with the FTC is trying to blame all on the price gaugers that you represent, whoever they are, these gaugers.
That's right. Economists from the left end of the spectrum to the right end of the spectrum say that Inflation Reduction Act and the American Rescue Plan Act, both of which passed during the Biden administration, both of which received their enthusiastic backing in the Biden administration, contributed to the inflation problem. You start adding up other policies, such as their policies against abundant energy, well, there you have another problem with food prices. The fact that you have to transport goods to market, you've got to keep them chilled inside the market. Well, that takes energy, and if energy prices go up, that's going to have to be reflected in food prices. That is energy policy decisions the Biden administration made to limit access to affordable electricity and affordable fuel. We pay the price for that.
Well, I think what this case and why I'm glad to have you on is there's so much more to the story. We see comments about, and I'm joking about price gauging because I can read what. Let me just let you hear what she said the next day.
Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging.
To me, it was kind of funny when I was playing those clips yesterday, and I've listened to them a few times since when I heard it the first time. To me, it's just when you have leadership that doesn't understand the policies that they put in place that other people put in front of them, you get, and we clearly see it with Kamala there, where she's only reading a teleprompter, so she doesn't understand the meaning of the words. And I think what you've shown here is with the prices, the reality is policies have effect, and that's why we have so much inflation right now.
Yeah, exactly. And you see this in other proposals that have been made under the Biden-Harris administration. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau recently held a request for public comment on proposals to eliminate junk fees in lending. They deliberately excluded from the discussion, until my organization brought it up in our own comments, the fact that 44% of the closing costs on a loan consists of state and local taxes. They do the same thing when they complain about fees that airlines charge, not admitting that anywhere between 15 and 30% of a typical airline ticket is federal and state and local taxes. It just goes on and on. The federal government creates problems for consumers, and then they propose clampdowns on the private sector rather than looking at themselves in the mirror and recognizing it's their taxes, their regulations, their overspending that are leading to many of these consequences.
What is the time frame before you can get the conclusion of this if we don't have an additional hearing? Is there any thoughts that this merger will go through this calendar year, or is this just going to be set in limbo with the employees, the thousands of employees, and the leadership of the two companies just in limbo?
It's possible that the merger could take place late in this year if the preliminary injunction hearing, which is what's going on right now, goes the government's way, well, then they get to proceed to their administrative hearing on the merger. Kroger has already sued against that process, saying it's unconstitutional to have the FTC's own people serving as judge and jury here. So then we get to that issue, and maybe the government will lose, maybe not. But a lot depends here, I think, on policymakers understanding what's going on and starting to say to the Federal Trade Commission, look, you have to concentrate on cases that prove actual consumer harm, not just cases with these novel theories about what a market looks like that doesn't reflect reality.
Yeah, I get it. It seems like especially with, I read something about the administrative law judge process. Now, the court that it's in now, is it a real nonpartisan judge, or is it an administrative law clerk that may not be a legal scholar?
The court that it's in now is the District Court for Oregon. So, yes, it's
legitimate
it's an
court,
actual
then.
Court. Yes.
And why is it in Oregon? Because I know Albertsons was based in, I thought, Boise. So why is it in Oregon? Why was that the venue?
Well, it's in the Oregon venue because, number one, Oregon's Attorney General really has it in for this merger. And number two, the federal government often gets deference as to where they want to make their injunction. So, they can often venue shop.
Yeah, well, that sounds like what's happening. Before I let you go, what else? Tell us more about your organization and what you're fighting now, what your views are on the upcoming election in both the Senate and the House, and then maybe the presidential, but how you see things shaping out from D.C.
Sure. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan citizen group founded back in 1969 for lower, simpler, fairer taxes, less wasteful government spending, taxpayer rights. We have a public interest litigation project that takes the IRS to court when they are abusing taxpayer rights. I think there's a lot at stake in this election, not only the future of the 2017 tax relief law that really helped out our economy, but also the debt ceiling's coming up for a vote next year. We are deeply in debt, regardless of who's president. They have to deal with that forthrightly. We even have a new taxpayer rights IRS reform package that we're working on in the Senate right now. These are all exciting developments, and we'd encourage folks to get more information about it on our website, NTU, our initials for National Taxpayers Union, NTU.org.
Well, that's great. In closing, what is the consumer? What would you like the consumer to do or remember from this?
I think that consumers should be flooding the Federal Trade Commission with their own comments. There is an ability to do that on their website, ftc.gov, and simply tell them, look, I'm seeing through this smoke screen here. You need to back off and let the Kroger-Albertsons merger go through. It'll help consumers. It'll help competition. It'll even help to increase union labor because Kroger is a heavily unionized employer.
And is Albertsons a unionized employer, or are they not unionized?
Less unionized. And of course, their competitors, their biggest ones, like Walmart, are not heavily unionized at all. And there's another irony here that the pro-labor administration is blocking the merger of a company that is very pro-labor with another.
Well, there's always, in politics, there's always a story behind a story, and there's that story behind that other story. So, there's a lot going on.